Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Craig McInnes. I'm the co-CEO at MyCarib, and I will be the moderator for today's session. MyCarib is a platform built specifically for medical device manufacturers and distributors that will help accelerate growth through stronger partnerships. Through MyCarib, you can match and connect with over 20,000 distributors and 20,000 manufacturers in over 125 countries around the globe. Most relevant to today's conversation about partnerships, MyCarib allows you to collaborate with existing and new partners in secure workspaces. The dashboards facilitate monitoring and measuring market, partner, and product performance globally. As a thank you for attending today's webinar, we will provide an opportunity for all attendees to use the MyCarib platform for an extended free trial until the end of the year. The thesis for today's webinar is that relationships between manufacturers and distributors start with great expectations and enthusiasm. But often these partnerships fail, resulting in lost revenue, lost time, and lost ground to competitors. How can you avoid these pitfalls and ensure that the investment in your partnerships pays off? Based on the 750 plus companies that registered for today's webinar, clearly, partner relationship management is front of mind for manufacturers, distributors, dealers, and other stakeholders. Let me introduce you to today's panelists to discuss this. Together, they have almost 100 years of experience in distribution and manufacturing in the medical device equipment and supplies industry. First, we have Denis Cantin. With over 20 years of medical device experience, Denis is an experienced advisor and expediter to the medical device and consumables sector, supporting manufacturers and distributors to achieve commercial success in overseas markets. Denis is an accomplished business development professional, having held senior leadership positions at Cardinal Health and Medline. Denis now works with manufacturers and distributors from Europe, North America, and Australia, New Zealand, helping them build successful partnerships to drive growth. Don Siri has over 30 years experience. He's a strategic healthcare executive focused on enabling global healthcare companies in entering and maximizing their opportunities in the Canadian healthcare market. As an executive at Cardinal Health, Don spent over 30 years in marketing, sales, global sourcing, legal, regulatory, quality assurance, and logistics in the acute, alternate care, and laboratory markets. And finally, we have Scott Newton with over 4 decades of success in international medical device markets with Hillrom, DeRoyal, CR Bard, and Cardinal Health. In senior leadership positions with multinational organizations, Scott's achievements include channel infrastructure creation, strategic alliances, mergers and acquisitions, product and brand positioning, general management, and multiple stakeholder engagement, all on a global scale. All 3 panelists have agreed to share their contact information with you, so I will put that up at the end of the discussion today. And just from an administrative point of view, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to put the question in the Q&A panel that should be available to you on your screen. And we will attempt to get to some or all of those questions as time allows at the end of the initial discussion. Okay, so let's get started, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We've got 5 main questions that we're going to go through, and we'll give a chance for all 3 of you as time allows to answer these questions. So let's start first with this one. How important is it for manufacturers to understand a new market before they decide to enter it? Where does this fail, and what are the impacts? And let's start first with Denis.
Thanks, Craig. Well, it's critically important for manufacturers to thoroughly
looks like we may have lost Denis' connection. Denis is at 3 in the morning in Australia. Let's give it a second to reconnect, but maybe Don, do you want to jump in with some thoughts on manufacturers understanding a new market before they decide to enter it?
Sure. Try not to steal any of Denis' thunder. So I guess the only point that I wanted to make, because primarily Denis' question, was something that I call cultural blindness. And it's when a manufacturer has a product and it's performed extremely well in other countries. So they assume that because it performed well in one country, it's going to perform just as well in another country. And they fail to recognize the country's clinical protocols may not be the same or easily changed. The funding of healthcare may not allow for this product in its regional or national contracts. It may not even be in the formularies, so it won't easily be accepted. And when this happens, again, as you said, this is what's going to cause delays and frustration in respect to the manufacturer side and also in respect to the distributor side. And I'll give you an example. There was a company that I knew that had a wound care product that was a great wound care product, had great clinical efficacy, and it was adopted in multiple countries. When they brought it in, they assumed that because, again, that cultural blindness, that it was successful in many other countries, that immediately it would be successful in this country. It turned out that the product, although it did have great clinical efficacy, the cost was a little bit greater, was greater than what was being used right now. And because of the funding of the healthcare system at the time, they're very budget conscious and they weren't willing to pay that extra money to get an outcome that was better, but again, impacted their budget. And so it took multiple years for this product to get adopted within the marketplace. And it just added incredible frustration on both sides because the distributor was trying to say, listen, you don't understand, this is why it's taken so long, even though they brought it up at the beginning. And the manufacturer was going, yeah, but look at this country, it's the same size as this country, and the adoption's great here and it's terrible there. Why? Well, one of the other countries had a public-private mix and this one only had a public mix. So again, not that cultural blindness of not understanding that market and just assuming that because of that one product is successful, it should be successful in another one. So that's what I would add. And I see Denis has joined us again.
Yes, Denis, you're back. Would you like to jump in?
Apologies. Yes. I'm not sure where we lost each other. However, the local market regulatory and government requirements are a key element that are important to understand. And overlooking this can delay the entire process of entering a new market. So questions like, do you require a local sponsor? Does your existing regulatory registrations, FDA, Health Canada, and the like, meet the requirements? And then there's a commercial model, whether it has yielded success in one market, will it deliver similar results? And what's the competitive landscapes? So those are the key elements that I would ask myself and the manufacturers need to do so to avoid a failure to launch. And I would recommend conducting a viability study prior to launching into a market. It's crucial. It'll save manufacturers time, effort, and ultimately money.
Excellent. Scott, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I think what's at play here for me is that term of think globally, act locally. And how many companies, as mentioned here, make assumptions that what's good in one market is the same in another. Too often we hear, especially here in Canada, that we're 10% of the U.S. population. And we all know that that's a mistake to look at the Canadian market that way. So investing those resources, taking those critical steps to understand your market is key. I once managed an overseas business that was years behind in technology, in the technological advancements of the products, years behind what we saw in North America and Europe. And the need to make decisions, marketing decisions, understand that environment, understand your competition was critical to our success. So investing that time and resources, think and act locally, or think globally, but act locally is so key. And just too often companies make assumptions and they hurry or rush their product into a marketplace. And that's a recipe for disaster in many cases.
Okay, great. So the second question is around partnering. So why do you think manufacturers and distributors often choose the wrong partners? And what are the impacts of these poor choices? And this time, Scott, let's start with you.
Yeah, again, they often don't do their homework, and they're too quick to respond to an opportunity. I think the real key is finding that fit with your partner, and the need to ensure that the call point and product synergies are there, and the depth and breadth of coverage you need is there. How often are we quick to respond to the first guy that, you know, gives you a purchase order for some stocking inventory, or expresses an interest based on a opportunity? You know, Google searches will bring up a whole lot of different companies that may appear to be in your space, but you've got to put the resources into better understanding who your options are, and who to collaborate with. What you're trying to gain, obviously, is share of wallet of your distributor, and you know, and ensure that that commitment is there. And there's a whole other lot of moving pieces that we'll talk about that, you know, that create that. But on the front end, you've got to look for that. Otherwise, a relationship will very quickly move from one of great expectations and collaboration into one of transaction. And that's what you want to avoid. And when you get into that case, you know, you're always hopeful that, you know, expectations will change, but, you know, just you get into a transactional situation, your opportunities for growing with that partner are slim. You know, I ran an international division and there'd be a global trade show going on, and how many times did I get a call after a trade show saying, I ran into a guy at the show that I think is going to solve all your channel problems. And you know, and I go, okay, but you know, to be on the ground there, or in Canada, or wherever I was in the world where I was working, it was important to just take that as input and not be reactive to, you know, the next best guy that comes along.
Great, Denis.
That's good points, Scott. I would add that, yes, oftentimes both parties get themselves into this space where they're negotiating in good faith. They tend to be too optimistic on what is being asked and what can be delivered. So ultimately, you end up with an equation of overpromising and undercommitting. You know, another watch out is that often manufacturers will look for partners who perhaps have a dominant position in the market, but will overlook you know, what their strengths are. And the example that I like to give is some organizations are better at hunting, you know, developing missionary selling versus fulfilling, farming, you know, providing a already established business. And so I think those are further watch outs that I would offer.
Sorry, Don, I was on mute.
Yep. Just to build a little on what Denis said, you know, where a manufacturer may look at a distributor and say, well, this is the biggest one, so let's go with it. And sometimes they look at their product and say the technical advantage of the product, it doesn't really matter what distributor we use, but you really got to check into where are their call points. Are they going to be calling on those customers that are going to buy the products? And I'll give it on a couple of my answers here. I'll give an example. There was a company that I was aware of that was looking at an infection control type product, which was air purification and sanitization. And they just looked at saying, well, this is the biggest distributor in the market. Let's go with them. They're going to be able to move it. But that distributor really didn't call on any healthcare engineering departments. They didn't call in infection control. And guess what? Well, the product never really took off in the marketplace, and the manufacturer ended up pulling back from that market and never re-entered into it. So complete failure on that. The other side is understanding the geography. I know it sounds really simple, but you really got to look at understand the logistical challenges that are going to be faced in that specific market, delivering to the customers in the various areas. That could be disparate population bases, all the issues in respect if your product needs to be protected from freezing or from heat or even ambient temperature if you're dealing with countries where there's going to be extremes in heat and cold. So you really got to do your due diligence in respect to that one. On the flip side, because most of my examples have been what the manufacturer should do, the distributor needs to do their due diligence in respect to the product and understanding what the proprietary ownership of it, the trademarks. Is this organization who's representing this product actually own this product, or are they just another agent for this product, which now just puts another layer in there? Regulatory approvals. Have we got all our regulatory approvals? Their manufacturing capabilities might be the greatest products in sliced bread, but if they can't meet the demand, you're going to go into back orders, and that with a customer, you're in a back order, that's a kiss of death. They're going to move on. And with those, it could mean customer complaints, customer frustrations, disqualification into contract bids, and outright customer refusal to even touch the product moving forward. The other one is understanding for manufacturers how the healthcare funding is administered in the various markets, how it's going to be purchased. Is it regional or is it national? Does it require, as Denis touched on, a specialized sales force? Is a general sales force good enough to move forward? And an example of that is, many of you on this call today, on the Zoom today, have been to Medica. And at one time I was looking for a product to fill a gap in our portfolio, and I saw a manufacturer, went over and was talking to them, and they said, listen, it's great, we already have a distributor in that marketplace, it's the best and the largest distributor within that marketplace, and we're not really interested in opening up. And I said, great, who is it? They gave me a name, never heard of the individual. We were the largest and still are the largest in the marketplace. So I was aware of all the competitors and all the other distributors that had no idea who this individual was. A year and a half later, that manufacturer came back and approached us and saying, listen, it's not working. We need to, but we had already found another manufacturer to fill that gap. And we never ended up moving forward with it, which was unfortunate.
Don, I think that story repeats itself over and over throughout the market. I liked what you said about call points and how many manufacturers align with somebody with their products that they want. Say they're into cardiovascular products, but if that distributor is strong in the cardiac OR and doesn't go to the cath lab, they may not serve.
Exactly.
You may think it's synergistic, but it's not. It can be two different parts of the building, absolutely two different call points. And you need to take those steps.
And again, as Denis said, if they're hunters, and if that's what you need, because it's a new product and you need really someone to open up the marketplace or someone who's going to move the box for you, you got to understand what your requirements are.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just as a reminder to everyone on the call today, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A panel and we'll try to get to those questions towards the end. Question 3, and this time we'll start with Don. Let's assume that the manufacturer understands the market, that the partnership is a good fit, and both parties did do their due diligence. Why might these partnerships still fail?
Thanks, Craig. It kind of builds on what Scott and I were just talking about. You may have a great distributor, but do they call on the specific markets that your products address? And I'll give another example where there was a healthcare product that was a nutritional product that it was specific to the long-term care marketplace. They picked someone that manufacturer that was great in the long-term marketplace, but that product needed someone to call on it into the dietitians, and they had nobody to call on it. And again, the product, I wouldn't say the product failed, but it took a long time for launch. You may have both good partners with the best of intentions, but have both manufacturer and distributor gone in and understood what the customer requirements are? Are they looking for in-servicing? Are they looking for fit testing? Are they looking for technical support and repairs? Are they looking for installation, etc.? So if you don't have all this, and you guys, the manufacturer and distributor, haven't vetted what is required by the customer, you're not going to be successful. The product's not, it's probably going up against a competitor's product that already has all of that. And if you don't have it, the customer's not even going to look at you. So that's one of the ones of why it can fail. The relationship can still fail due to the amount of manufacturers and distribution, the amount of manufacturer and distribution reps represent. So if you have a distributor that their reps have a huge bag and you need a lot of time, it's a new launch for your product, you got to sell it, you got to demo it, you've got to move forward. And if there's a lot of technical selling, if they have too much in their bag, how much actual sales time are you going to get? And that's one of the things that you have to be aware of as you move forward with that distributor. The other one is why it fails is your product may not be aligned with the annual strategic focus of the distributor, causing the reps not to really focus on your product, leading to disappointing sales. So if they said, okay, for this instance, we're going to be focusing on infection control, and your product is not an infection control product, then it's going to be a me too after the fact, taken out of the bag, and you're going to be disappointed because you're not going to be the sales. Another one of what I see, and this one is an easy one to fix, communications usually between the manufacturers and the distributors' marketing departments. And it's critical to me that the manufacturer develops a relationship with the distributor's head of sales, just to make sure it's not to bypass the marketing team, it's not to bypass your main contact, but it's really to start to build that relationship and to make sure that you're aligned and that they are aware of your product and they know that you are interested in moving it forward. Because if you never talk to them, they may not even realize the value that you're bringing forward. It can still fail long-term because you're out of alignment in respect to the supply chain. How many days on hand do the products that the distributor is going to be warehousing? What are the timing of orders? How long does it take for order fulfillment? What are the shipping times? A lot of times they're coming from over, different countries overseas. You've got, like we're seeing right now with all of the issues in respect to shipping backlogs and container issues, nothing kills a relationship faster than back orders. On the rep side, on the customer side, and the frustration of the manufacturer as we move forward. Another one, and I know I'm punching through these pretty quick, so I apologize for that, is that if a manufacturer starts to use multiple distributors in the same country, if the reps know this, they're not going to focus on it. The last thing they want to do is spend a lot of time working on trying to close a sale and having another distributor come in, undercut the cost, and the customer obviously is going to be focused on the cost of the product. They're going to go with the cheaper side. If that happens once, no rep will take it out of the bag again. They're going to be really focused on where they know they can close the deal. Another one, which, this one's tough because every organization is focused on their profit. It's the distribution fee you're willing to provide. Profitability is important on both sides, but you want to ensure the distributor is incentivized to move your product and represent your product. To me, nothing ensures a quick failure is when you start to go through and say, here's the distribution fee we're going to pay you, and we're going to start to slice it up, saying this much for your sales reps, this much for distribution, this much for regulatory, and go through and have everything broken down by percentage points. What tends to happen later on is when you're having meetings, instead of, if there's issues in respect to hitting your results, instead of discussing how to fix those issues, you start to try to shave points off to cover up the lack of sales. And when that happens, you start to lose the distributor. You as a manufacturer are frustrated, and you start to slowly see the relationship declining. The other one I have, and I apologize, I have quite a few on this one. You need to have the tools for the distribution reps from the manufacturer to make sure that they're successful. You need product training and support, clinical information and support materials, country-specific validation of the clinical efficacy, either supported through clinical trials. just because it's been successful in another country and you have validation and clinical trials in another country, it doesn't necessarily apply into that country. And you really need to have those clinical trials and clinical efficacy done in that country. You need country-specific subject matter experts and their recommendations so that this will be quickly accepted by the customer point. The last point I'll make on this before I turn it over to Denis and Scott, why it fails if you have no local contact or an agent. You really need someone local to handle the daily issues, especially if you look at a manufacturer that's probably in multiple countries. You've got multiple distributors you're dealing with, and there's going to be questions coming in from all of these distributors and synthesized into one person into your organization. Time differences and just challenges of scope. You can't address everything. So if you have someone in the country that can deal with these minor issues, you may have a distributor that has 50 reps. They all have the same question. They all come into that one point. They can get that answered by your person and the manufacturer's representative by getting one answer rather than that manufacturer trying to respond to 50 reps in one country and 50 in another. So having someone that can really keep that line of communication moving forward to me is critical for quick response.
Great, Scott, do you want to jump in?
Don, you've shared a lot of good data points there in managing a relationship. And to the question, here's, you got the right market, you got the right fit, everything's going great, but why does it fail? I'll start by saying that at the best of times, distribution can be a difficult and complicated business model at the best of times. And companies are kind of migrating between, do I go direct? Do I go, distributor? Do I have a hybrid? They're always kind of shifting around. But I want to raise a topic here that I think is sensitive or controversial in some ways, and I'd be interested in knowing how the panelists feel about it. And that is the issue of transparency. There's always that unwritten or unsaid or unspoken sense of how transparent is a distributor to a manufacturer. And I recently had a conversation with a senior executive of a large distribution company that shared with me that that he feels that he's going against the grain in providing a high level of transparency to the suppliers, and the end result is a much greater relationship and greater success. And I think that's worth taking a look at here. Is how transparent, or how, on the other end of it, how secretive or protective is that a threat? I kind of open that up to your input.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think you're touching on a couple of points that I have in the last question. What are we seeing as some commonalities in successful relationships? I think transparency is key. I know there's a lot of hesitancy, as you said, really as the term just opening up the books and saying, hey, here's what's going on. It's really going to determine quickly what kind of relationship you have. If the manufacturer opens up and says, hey, these are the issues, or the distributor and the other party takes advantage of that, then your relationship is not there. And it quickly becomes evident. When you're open and transparent and you're saying, hey, these are the issues I have, hopefully your other partner's saying, great, I'm glad you gave it to me. Let's work on how we get these resolved and how do we work around it. And to me, when a manufacturer and a distributor do that together, that's the best relationship, and that's a key for success. And and point 5, that's one of the things I agree with, is that is the critical piece. Is it all comes down to trust.
Yeah. And I'd like to remind the viewers, don't ignore the signs. What Scott and Don have touched on, you typically will see those signs early on in the discussions and negotiations. And so if trust your gut on this. And I both agree with what you both said. Oftentimes, if you're too optimistic and you ignore those will manifest into bigger problems. So that transparency is crucial.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Just a reminder again to everyone on the call, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A panel, please, and we'll try to get to those at the end. Angela, if you're ready, we have a quick poll question for everyone on the call today. We'd be interested in your thoughts on future webinar topics. These are some of the topics that we are planning webinars around. We would just love for you to check the ones that you're most interested so that we can gauge your thoughts on it, and you can certainly select more than one option here. Okay, excellent. Let's move on to question number 4. So when faced with a failing partnership, are there ways to repair that relationship, or is it usually time to cut your losses and move on? And this time we'll start in Australia with Denis.
Well, if they acknowledge the partnership is failing, then I think it's you restore communication. It's a critical to do so at that junction. To collaborate in conducting a root cause analysis, asking the big questions: why is this failing? Was it a failure to launch? Have the market dynamics changed? The KPIs that were agreed upon, were they monitored? Were they measured? Or sadly, were they ignored? And could they have provided insights into how the relationship was progressing or not progressing? So again, if they acknowledge that there's a challenge, then put a recovery plan in place. Clear objectives, who owns the tasks and timelines on the deliverables. Now, conversely, if you're faced with a partner who doesn't acknowledge that the partnership is failing, then again, communication is crucial, but let them know that you're unhappy and that the partnership is at risk due to the unmet deliverables. And your contract will have clauses that are clearly outline a call to action there. But if unsuccessful with discussions before you get into the clauses, give them fair notice that you're unhappy and that you're going to action those termination clauses. And sadly, start the search. Look for a new partner. I know that there's a great deal of effort that goes into this process. Now, there may be, the footnote, there may be a situation where you may want to begin the search before you'd give a partner a termination notice. Again, it depends on the situation. But once again, proceed with caution, but communication is key.
Don, your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess just a couple. As Denis pointed out, you should have a contract when you're starting entering into a new relationship. It's like your prenup. Let's understand what everybody's going to be doing. But once the relationship starts going, if you have to pull the contract, then you're in trouble, because my view is once you start pulling the contract saying you're not doing this, you're not doing that, right, the relationship's already over, and you'll never. And if you're having that brought out all the way from the beginning of the relationship, you're never going to have a great relationship. The way I see it being successful is before you even, as part of getting into it, is having an agreement together on dispute resolution, a non-legal, non-binding, and anybody who's a lawyer in the audience, I apologize for saying that, but it's really a fail-safe of saying that, all right, you may have these two parties dealing further down in the organization on a day-to-day, and things are starting to get out of whack, yet both parties are afraid to start to raise it up the ladder. If you have that formalized dispute resolution of saying, okay, it's not working, let's move it up. And you're going to get to the point where the groups are going to say, okay, then this is solvable. Let's sit down. Let's work it through. And if you could get to that point, then you get it back on track and the relationship's there. And I've seen it happen multiple times where, to Denis' point, the manufacturer's not happy. I wasn't aware. We get in a room and we start to talk through what the issues are. and they're minor things that can quickly be corrected. We reset and get back on track. And I think that's key. You've got to have that dispute resolution. Hopefully you don't have to, because the communication, back to Scott's point, that transparency is there. But you always have that in case you have someone further down the line that says, what is my next step? What should I do next? So it's just, again, a fail-safe.
That's a good point where if you're working within a large organization and you've got a dedicated team, an operational team, make sure that it's communicated all throughout the entire organization. So, the senior execs who were involved initially on negotiating the agreement, make sure that they're aware, because I find that sometimes that there lies the issue. At the lower echelons, they're doing their best, but they may be, find themselves overworked, but they haven't communicated. They haven't declared the fact that things aren't going well.
Exactly.
Prevention is the cure, I suppose, but this question is, at the point that it's failing, and try to prevent that. We often look and look at how slowly these relationships do fail, and I just like to avoid Groundhog Day, where every 3-6 months, whatever it is, you just go back and you have the same conversation. So, to Denis' point about communication, it's so critical. And to be able to identify that this is in decline, to improve your communication immediately, reestablish expectations, because maybe they weren't aligned in the first place, and do a reboot, and then get out. I always thought I was good enough to repair things, but not always the case. And looking back on it, I think a lot of cases where you should have just got out. So, you like to think the motivation is there on both sides to repair a declining relationship, but it's not always there. So on that note, get out.
Great, thanks, Scott. So we'll move into the final question that we have prepared for the panel, and then I'll open up questions from attendees today. The final question for you guys is, when you think about your most successful manufacturer distributor partnerships, what made these partnerships so successful? And let's start with Don.
Well, I'm glad to say I have had the luxury of having what I viewed as extremely good relationships with multiple manufacturing partners, and each one of them kind of demonstrated what some of the things I'm going to cover. One, Denis kind of tied on it, alignment, but more alignment on both organizations, from the senior management on down. For example, marketing for strategy, sales to make sure they're executing, RAQA from the manufacturer to the distributor to make sure that we have approvals and expediting the product. Logistics, I touched on that before, to make sure there's a smooth supply chain moving forward. Finance, you go, why would the finance departments? Well, for billing purposes, contract purposes, pricing purposes. IT departments together to make sure that the data transfer is happening properly, so that everybody's in the loop of what's going on. So that alignment, so that you're not, again, earlier I said, you're not going to that one person that's kind of taking everything down. If there's an issue, the finance person can pick up the phone and call the finance person on the other side and get that cleared up and keep things moving quickly. Scott touched on this. I think it's expectations alignment, to set them annually and reviewed at minimum on a monthly basis. Understand how you're going to measure. Denis talked about the KPIs, the success, and how it's going to be recognized. These can be, done remote, as we're doing, face-to-face, and also deal with issues off the rails, that when things are going off the rails before they become critical. And, Scott touched on it. I've seen successful partnerships where we take the blame out, and it's the transparency. What's the issue? What do we got to do to fix it? Let's get it done. And not that, well, you messed up or you messed up. One of the ones Scott talked about, Groundhog Day, and I'll explain an example of what I've seen as Groundhog Day is when you weren't aligned on how to measure success. So for example, the the distributor is got their month end, and this is how they're measuring the numbers, and the manufacturer's got theirs and how they measure the numbers, and you get in a meeting and all you're doing is discussing how these numbers line up and what's the actual true numbers, rather than dealing with the issues, which is, let's get this thing moving forward. So get that aligned up front so that when you sit, you can say, okay, what are the issues and how do we move it? For the manufacturer to spend time with the distributor sales force, again, these are the people that are your face to your customers in that specific country. So to have one-on-one, be there at sales meetings, provide them access to online resources, give them market-specific info. What are the best practices? Even though I said earlier is that, well, just because the clinical data in one country may not apply to another one, that's true. But if you can say, well, these are some of the best practices, why don't we start to look at, can these apply within that specific country? Specific incentives, so little things such as spiffs and recognition to create that excitement for that sales force that are representing your product, and collaboration on trade shows. Nothing, in my view, went further is that when there's a trade show and the manufacturer was there and the distributor was there and they were in the same booth together and saying, we're partners, we're going to move this product together. That went a long way. Another one was a reasonable distribution fee. And I know that's a loaded word, reasonable. What's reasonable for the manufacturer and what's reasonable for the distributor. But, looking at what that fee is and what you're going to get for it, and recognizing that you may have to share the pain. For example, we've had situations where we've had a manufacturer, contracts coming up. We know as a distributor, we got to be aggressive. We're willing to, give up some distribution fee to the manufacturer to help them win, and they're willing to give up on price so that we can get everything down together and win that contract. And to me, that is a true partnership where we're saying, hey, we're all both willing to get a little bit of pain here to be successful and win. I touched on it a little earlier, that main contact in that specific country to address daily issues. I've seen that where you have an individual, and that's done wonders in respect to making sure you have a great relationship. Another one which is really different, and I'm not sure if people thought of it, is product lifecycle collaboration. Understanding that eventually your product, no matter how great it is going to become commoditized. And working with the manufacturer and distributor for both of you to recognize where you are on that life cycle and what do you have to do on pricing to make sure that you continue to be successful and gain your market share. If you think that, hey, I introduced this product and it's the top product and it's 8 years later and it's still going to drive a premium price, it's not going to work. So you really have to look at that product life cycle and be realistic.
And Don, if I just jump in, that's also where transparency on margins plays out.
Exactly.
And that becomes threatening to people, right?
Yeah. And I know it's a challenge for both sides because it's a trust factor. And another one was the hated word, I know by a lot of manufacturers, exclusivity. And this is providing a distributor exclusivity on a product. The benefit of that is that the distributor knows that all the efforts they put into your product is going to reap them benefits. If they know that there's multiple distributors out there, they're just going to bid it. And that's all it's going to be. And if your product needs a lot more focus, a lot more technical, which we all want, it's not going to happen. So by choosing an exclusive distributor and driving it, again, going back and making sure it's the right one, they're calling on the right call points and they're doing all the right things, you're going to be successful. If the product is unique, and not everybody can have a unique product, but I've seen successes where we have a unique product, it's an easier sell for the distributor and the value of the product self-evident. And again, that drives a lot of success. Other things which I mentioned about the technical support, the resources, they have to be available. But the last, I think we've touched on it multiple times and Scott's touched on it, open and honest dialogue. If you can't have that open and honest dialogue, any relationship, either on your personal side or even on your business side, you're not going to be successful. So you've got to have that. You've got to have that transparency. And those are the key things that I've seen in respect to successful manufacturer distributor partnerships over the years.
Don, those are good points. Just to add a few others, as it relates to exclusivity market segments, understanding. So if some partners will look at one large partner, it helps make the whole relationship easier to manage, but you may get a diluted result from it, where if you really want specialized, so whether it's the hospital sector, the alternate care, aged care, and other, or even if your product has span across multiple, like vets even. So to me, exclusivity is, you may need to go with smaller, specialized, clinically driven partners to really get that result. And just don't let convenience sort of, sidetrack you from managing multiple partners who will give you more focused effort.
Totally agree, Denis. The only thing that the manufacturer has to be cognizant of is that they can't allow bleeding over. So you may have someone who's in the vet market, has got exclusivity, is saying, reps will be reps, God bless them. They're going to see an opportunity in another market, being in long-term care or in healthcare, and they're going to try to bid the product, even though they may not have access to that. So, you can restrict that within your contract, even though and hopefully that they don't bleed through.
Well, and exclusivity, of course, has to be mutual between both parties.
Yes.
And without it, it's clearly a threat to the relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, there are some markets that we know that just are not exclusive markets. And, around the world, the marketplace isn't that way. But from my experience, most of them are exclusive, and exclusivity is a very important point you've raised.
Yeah.
You guys covered a lot of good points as to what makes these partnerships successful, and we covered a lot of things. For me, it's just summarize it more with teamwork, transparency, and alignment, and trust. And we've talked about those things already. And teamwork is so important. Are you working together? Are you collaborating? It's the whole, is there a collaboration, or is it just transactional? Transparency, we've covered that, how I think that's an important topic, and it's a sensitive one, but I think it does lend itself to successful partnerships at whatever level of transparency there is. And then trust, it's the foundation of any good collaborative relationship. So all the things you've mentioned there, I think play into that. And when I look at the successful manufacturer distributor relationships I've been involved in, those are the three pillars of success, I think.
Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen. So let's move into some questions from the attendees today. Just as I'm doing that, a couple quick reminders. We will send you a follow-up email with a recording of the webinar. We're also going to be summarizing a document from this presentation today to try to basically bullet the best practices that have been spoken about today. And we'll do that afterwards in a single email. That should be out in the next 2 days. It just depends on when the recording is ready, but we'll do that. We'll do that for you for sure. So we just talked about some experience that you've had in terms of relationships that really worked. One of the questions is, what would you do differently? You guys have had long careers in both the manufacturing and the distributor side. Are there some things that you sort of look back now and say, what would you do differently over time?
Well, we all would do things differently. We're lying if we said we wouldn't. I think I already alluded to the fact that I thought I was always good enough to fix things, and I don't think that's always the case. So, a lot of times is to early intervention and get in and fix things or get out. I think that's don't let things get stale and prolonged and have the finger pointing and the Groundhog Day and all those good things. Just take care of business.
Craig, I would add that, oh, go ahead, Don.
I was just going to say on my side, it was probably do things more different or differently, more different, not English. Differently would be, recognize who your important partners are and make sure that they're getting the amount of time that they deserve and the respect that they deserve. And what I mean by that is you're usually, as anybody in any business, you're dealing with issues and firefighting. And a lot of times the organizations you're firefighting with are the ones that you don't have the greatest relationship with, the ones that are not willing to work with you, the ones that are causing, problems with multiple distributors and all of that in the business. And you're dealing with all of them while you should have been saying, put them to the side, focus on these guys that are your true partners. And I was lucky enough that, we never lost any of those true partners. They were always there and hung in for us. But if I had anything I'd do differently, that's one of the things I do.
I would add that as partners are doing their due diligence and looking at what that new market presence has, dig deep, look at some of the up and comers as well. Don't look at the tried and true, those who are established, who may have dominant presence. Because to the point that Don just pointed out, you could find yourself with someone who has a full bag, and so you'll get very little mind share. Where you might get someone who's on the uptake, someone who's just coming up, who'll be hungrier, will give you better mind share. So and it's part of that. Again, doing that whole market analysis and ensuring that you've captured everyone who could be a viable partner.
Excellent. There are a lot of questions. I won't be able to get to all of them, but I'm trying to pick a few here that there's a fair bit of overlap. And one of them is around going direct versus utilizing distribution partners. So if you guys could speak to your experience there and your thoughts on the process or the decision to go direct versus utilizing distribution partners, what drives that? What's your experience been there?
It's sometimes can be cost prohibitive to come into a market, and I'll pick Australia, regulatory, just the commercial landscape. From year one, you're looking at probably an excessive fixed costs versus what the ramp up would be from profitability. The advantage of going with a distributor or a local partner is the fact that your representation or your product line is only is being subsidized by the fact that their fixed cost is diluted over across a number of partners. So again, I think it's a decision point to say build it and the business will come is one model, and if that's what you're able to sell to the organization, then that might be an option. But I think the wise is to look at local presence who can guide you, and I think you'll get to better success metrics sooner with a partner.
I guess I'll take it before Scott. To build on what Denis said, it really depends on your organization, your strategy, your strategic direction. To enter into a new country and go direct, it's going to take a long time to build that market. And if your organization's willing to do that and to put those resources in, great. But again, you've got to build relationships. You've got to build a capability of bidding on contracts. You've got to build your warehousing. You've got to build, on and on and on and on, to Denis' point, all that cost associated with it. And I've seen some organizations do it. I've seen some organizations do it successful, but it's taking quite a long time. I've seen other strategies where organizations just come in and they focus on the large markets, the GPOs, the group purchasing organizations, and just bid on those to be able to build critical mass and then grow. Again, you still got to have someone, there, you're dealing with it, and the warehousing, all of those costs associated with it. So it really becomes timing. If your strategy is, we want to take the long haul and probably get maximum profitability, then you go direct. If you want to hit the market quick and build on relationships, probably not carry inventory because your distributor's carrying it for you, so that frees up capital. Then go to the distribution route. So it really depends on your organization. There's no clear cut of saying yes or no. And again, the type of product you have. If it's a highly technical product, that you're probably, and you're calling on a very small call point, you're probably going to want to do it on your own or hire an agent or as Denis said earlier, a hunter that's going to go in and move that for you. So again, it really depends. There's no cut and dried answer on that one.
Guys, I'm just going to jump in. Sorry, Scott. I know we're just out of we're down to a minute or two. I'm going to have to wrap it up, but I do want to make sure I share some contact information with everyone and a quick follow up here as well. So you should be seeing my my wrap up slide here. So thank you all very much for attending today. The contact information for each of the panelists today is on the screen, as well as my contact information. Mentioned earlier that we are extending a MyCarib free trial offer to the end of the year for any attendees today. We are going to send you a follow-up with a link to the recording of the session, as well as the best practices summary. Given that we didn't get to a lot of the questions, I'm going to try to incorporate responses to those questions in the best practice document as a follow-up as well, and that'll be out to you in the next few days. Now, lastly, I will mention we tried purposely not to talk a lot about our platform, which is MyCarib, which will actually help facilitate a lot of the things we talked about today. I am going to stay on. If anybody would like to have a look at the platform, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes showing the platform for anyone who's interested in staying on. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Don, Denis, Scott, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. You guys bring tremendous experience, and I can see from a lot of the comments that people really enjoyed your comments and experiences that you shared today. So thank you very much, everyone. If you'd like to stay on, feel free to do so, and I will jump into the platform and give you a sense of what it's all about. Thanks, guys.
Sure. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Don.
Bye now. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Okay, for those that are going to stay on, I'm just going to share my my screen here momentarily, and I'll give you a quick run through the platform. Just give me half a second here. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. Maybe Scott, if you can't see it, maybe let me know. But I just wanted to give everyone a quick run through on the platform. So MyCarib is a channel optimization platform where you can discover markets, find partners, and then collaborate and communicate together in the platform. So the key aspects are dashboards, market discovery, finding partners, and then working with your partners in workspaces. Okay, so before I jump into it, I'm just going to show you very quickly. Our portfolio is roughly 20,000 manufacturers, 20,000 distributors. If you came into MyCarib for the first time, you would claim your company. Your company profile would look something like this fictitious cardiovascular manufacturer. You would have an opportunity to update your profile so that it's accurate the way you like it. It's got the right description in here. You know, certifications that you have can be part of your profile. And then certainly any product categories you focus on and your call points would all be part of your profile. From there, I'll show you market discovery, which is typically of most interest to manufacturers. The idea here is basically that in my case, I'm a Swedish-based manufacturer. My active markets are showing up as teal here on the screen. And then my targeted markets are these purple markets where I'm anticipating expanding into. For any market that you look at here, well, the first 100 markets in the world, we basically have these little cards that tell you a little bit about the market. And as you click on various markets around the world, you'll see these little cards pop up. If you then want to drill into a specific market, It allows you to drill in and learn more about the market. So as we talked today about how manufacturers need to research and understand the market, that's really what this is all about. So it allows you to get an overview of the market, including the healthcare background, how medical devices and equipment are managed and purchased in that particular market. There are all kinds of links to purchasing groups and various items there. We've got healthcare expenditure and financing that looks at things like the private-public mix of spending, as well as where spending is taking place. We get into assets and employment, looking at hospitals, healthcare, beds by clinical area. And every data point that you see here will be cited based on what year the data point is, what the measure is, and what the source is, in case you want to drill in further. Because a lot of this data is available publicly, but we brought it together for you. We also have breakdowns by clinical specialists and physicians. So, for example, if you sell to cardiologists in this particular market, there would be 1,400 cardiologists in that market. And we get into other areas of employment in the space as well. Utilization focuses on surgeries by category as well as diagnostic exams. And from there, we get into trends and indicators, a look at medical conditions, disease states, again, to help you size the market. And then finally, as it relates to regulatory, we provide an overview of the country-specific medical device regulatory authority with direct links to that authority. We also list and describe the license types. So whether those are licensed to sell or licensed to manufacture or both, they are listed there with links. And then if this particular market belongs to any multinational regimes like MDSAP, CE Mark, Mercosur, or others, we provide information on those as well as links directly to them. So that market discovery is available for markets around the world, as you'll see here as I'm clicking on some of my target markets, and you'll be able to drill into those markets. The second key aspect is finding partners. So finding partners is really all about the manufacturer finding distribution partners, the distributors finding manufacturing partners. So our database starts with about 40,000 companies, as you can see in the top right. Let's take the role of perhaps a manufacturer looking for distribution. So I'm going to say, show me distributors. And I'm looking for distributors in Brazil. And perhaps from a product category perspective, I'll use my framework, which is cardiovascular. So let's just apply that and see how many distributors there are in Brazil that represent cardiovascular products. And you'll see 93 of those. Now, some of those are not headquartered in Brazil, so I could further subset that and say, I just want companies that are headquartered in Brazil. And now I'm down to 91 companies. And then I could get even further, more specific. I could say, maybe show me companies that's mention catheters or ablation or something of relevance. I could also look at things like subregions. So for example, this is Brazil, so it's going to show us states. Maybe I'm looking for a distributor in the state of Rio de Janeiro, and I could narrow it down further from there. In any case, as you then look at these companies, you'll see that there's a profile of the company. So you can click on that profile. You can see if they have a LinkedIn page. You can view their LinkedIn page. You can view their website, their description. And then ultimately, if you're ready to reach out to this partner, you could fill in a message. I'm a cardiovascular manufacturer. I'm looking for distribution in Brazil, and you could attempt a connection with that particular company. If you take another view of this, instead of saying, I'm a manufacturer looking for distribution, let's switch this around a little bit and say I'm a distributor. I'm actually looking for manufacturers. And all I'm going to do is clear out a few things here. I'm still going to look for cardiovascular manufacturers globally. So there's 1,300 of those. You can see them sorted by country here, various headquarter countries. And I could get more specific. I could say, maybe focusing in on call points, or get more granular and say, I'm looking for manufacturers that specifically mention catheters in their description. And my 1,300 manufacturers now goes down to 105. And again, I could even look at, let's look at specific countries. I'm looking for manufacturers out of China. I'm looking for manufacturers out of other parts of the world. Again, same kind of concept. So we can find and search for these, shortlist these companies, and do outreach. Now, the final piece I'll talk about very quickly here is the notion of collaboration. So a lot of what the guys talked about today was improving collaboration between partners. And that's really what workspaces are all about. So again, in my case, I'm a manufacturer out of Sweden. In the UK market, I have 2 distributors. I've got XYZ Distributors and Scott Care Cardiac Systems. For each of those, I've got a workspace where I can collaborate securely with that partner around things like expectation setting, forecasting, file sharing, all the things that are important. So as I think about then what a workspace is, I'll drill into one of these just to show you very quickly. I won't spend a lot of time on this because you know, there's a lot here, but this is a partnership between Global Cardio, the manufacturer, and XYZ Distributor in that market. We invited them into this workspace. We can collaborate together in this workspace. We can share files. We can have discussions. So for example, to show you a quick one here, I launched a new catheter product line. I included a new sell sheet for that catheter line, and I had some back and forth between myself and the distributor on that product offering. So instead of a bunch of emails going back and forth, it's all here as part of the system of record for this relationship. We also have sales plans and scorecards. I'll show you very quickly what a sales plan looks like. So this is a shared sales forecast between the manufacturer and the distributor. I've got 2 product categories, stimulators and catheters, and 4 different product offerings. Together with the distributor, we agree on targets, and then we contract to actuals. And this is by quarter in this case. And as the quarters progress and we have some dialogue, that dialogue can be in here as well. But again, we agree on targets, we track the actuals, and together we're on the same page in terms of forecasting. The same would be true of target setting around activities. So for example, in this case, we set up with the partner 4 objectives that we were going to try to accomplish. We set some targets on those. So for example, we were going to do some conferences together. We were going to sponsor some key opinion leader white papers together. We together agree on targets, we track the actuals, and from here we can even do an end of quarter assessment where me as the manufacturer, I'm putting in my comments and my scores. My partner, the distributor, puts in their comments and their scores, and we don't get to see those until both partners actually submit that. What that leads to then is a much better conversation about what's working, what's not working in terms of the relationship. So if you think about the scorecard and you think about the sales forecast, the sharing of files and the discussions, at the very least then the relationship between myself and this distributor in this case, we've got a dashboard here that manages that relationship. The sales forecast, key dates between us, which I didn't get into, that quarterly business summary that I just talked about is right here for me, including all my scorecards over here, year to date on all these key metrics. And if you think about how that starts to roll up, if I manage multiple relationships, which I do, so in my case, I'm managing a distributor in Spain, I've got 1 in Italy, I've got 2 in the UK, I've got 1 in Germany, and I manage a direct team in Sweden. For each of those relationships, I have a workspace. You can create workspaces very simply, invite your partners into those workspaces, and you can collaborate with them there. If you were looking at this as a distributor, you would see your partnerships with your suppliers. So you might have 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 supplier workspaces where you are working with them in a shared workspace. When you think about it then from a global perspective, whether you're a distributor or a manufacturer, all of that now starts to roll up to my global dashboard. So for example, if you think about my market performance as a manufacturer, I'm in 5 markets right now, and I can see which are my performing markets and underperforming markets based on target versus actual sales. I can see which of my partners specifically are underperforming or performing. And again, flip this around. If you're a distributor, you would see your supplier partners that you're working with. And then lastly, over here on the right, you'll see product category performance. So which of my product categories are performing? And again, that's valid whether it's a distributor or a manufacturer. And then ultimately here, I'm seeing my global forecast across all my products and all my partnerships, including my direct markets as well, all rolling up into my global sales forecast. So when you think about that, just really quickly, I should have mentioned, if you're managing these workspaces, you invite a partner into the workspace. For manufacturers, if you're a subscriber of this platform, you have the ability to invite your distributors into workspaces. Those distributors do not have to pay anything to collaborate with you in the platform. You invite them in, they can be in there within minutes, working with you in these shared workspaces. Distributors, if you want to expand your usage into things like finding other partners, other suppliers, creating your own workspaces, inviting your own partners in, there are some licensing around that. But to collaborate with your partners in here does not cost anything for the distributors in our model. So I'm going to pause there just to really quickly wrap it up. I really appreciate everyone joining the presentation today. If you'd like a deeper dive into this, we're happy to set up a time to do that. The reality, though, as well, is any one of you can actually go to our website. You will see on the website an option in the top right for start for free. We have pricing here if you want to go look at what would it look like after your free trial. You could actually click on that start for free button. It'll just ask you for your name, the company you work for. There is no credit card requirement, anything like that. You can actually jump into the platform and start having a look yourself at everything I showed you here today. So on that note, I'm just going to pause sharing or stop sharing momentarily. Really want to thank everyone for their time today. Thank the panelists. Really appreciate your time. We will follow up with the recording, as well as the best practices summary and some more information about this extended free trial. I really appreciate a lot of people stayed on for that. I hope you found that last little part useful. We didn't want to put it into the regular presentation because that was the webinar, wasn't supposed to be focused on the product, but I appreciate many of you staying on and having a look at the product. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic rest of the day and rest of the week. And I know for some of you, we'll see you at Medica or other upcoming conferences. Thank you very much for your time.